The Air Force has been accused from time to time of hiding information about UFO. What do you have to say to that comment?
Those charges are absolutely untrue. We always wanted accredited media, when they want to investigate, they give them specific sightings.
There's nothing of that.
There's nothing on it at all.
Bombshell allegations that the U.S. has retrieved alien technology.
In January of 1996, North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, warns Brazilian authorities their radar has picked up UFO activity near Varginha, Brazil. By January 20th, news coverage across the globe explodes with stories of a UFO crash. Strange creatures are reported by military and civilians in the town of Varginha.
Doctor, you apparently had an opportunity to interview some fellow physicians in Brazil.
Okay, we knew that one of these creatures or beings, for lack of a better word, was taken to two hospitals. And one of the hospitals, which was Hospital Regional, by two military personnel. One actually held the creature on his lap and took it to the hospital.
Really?
This is another story because that individual died within 2 weeks after exposure to the creature. The sister of the deceased military police officer described symptoms that to me were very similar to Ebola infection. This witness heard I was coming to town and said that he would be willing to talk to me as a colleague.
Yes, yes.
So a meeting was arranged. Nothing was allowed to be taped. There was no video, no recording of any kind. We met him. This man was frightened to death. He was threatened not only with the loss of a job and his license, but he was threatened with a little more serious consequence.
That would all do it. That would do it.
A disclaimer was the first thing out of his lips. This didn't happen to me. These were rumors. These are things that I heard about. I have no relationship at all, etc., etc. If you want to hear this, I'm willing to tell you about it. The information I got was through interpretation. However, when it came to the medical terminology and the medical lingo, we were one-to-one. It didn't make any difference whether he was speaking Portuguese and I was speaking English.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, he was not told what this was. There was some emergency. There was military in the hospital. He was taken in, asked to go into the surgical wing of the hospital, and he inquired as to what was going on, and they told him that it wasn't his business, just to follow directions and do what he was told. He was taken into the operating room. There was something lying on the table that he knew was short, covered with a drape sheet. The doors were shut. They told him, don't come out until he's resolved the medical problem. Don't ask questions, just do your thing, make sure the patient's alive. There were some x-rays that were up on the view box. He looked at the x-rays and found that there was a compound fracture of the leg. At that point, he went over to the table and started to roll back the drape and was horrified. He thought that this was some kind of terrible, horrible deformity. As he began to examine what was laying there, he realized that this was not a human being at all.
Not a human.
And he described it, a creature that was about almost 5 feet in length, with a large head, a thin neck, brown, oily-colored skin, no body hair, no facial hair, no mustache, a tiny little nose. At this point, his demeanor began to change, and you had to sit there as a witness and watch this to completely understand the emotion now that was filling the room, because it was only a short time after this. I mean, it was easy to realize these weren't rumors.
This wasn't human, but apparently it had what we would think of as a leg, and it was obvious that there was a bone.
Yeah, so that was a broken leg with the bone sticking out through the skin. I asked him about the blood and the bone. What's the blood like? Is it blue and, jumps around on the floor or what?
Yes.
And he said, no, the blood is very similar to human blood, even with the cellular constituents. Large exception was platelet reading, he said, was about 10,000 times higher than in human blood.
Wow.
And that it clotted almost immediately as it came out of the blood vessel, but he didn't know whether this was due to increased platelets or whether the blood was being exposed to an atmosphere that was different than where this thing had come from. The bone was, again, very similar to human bone, except it was a little more pink in color. It contained what is called medically lacunae, and these are holes or apertures that are in the bone. He said it almost looked like osteoporotic bone. But he said because of these internal lacunae,
yes,
the tensile strength of the bone was much, much stronger than human bone. And, he knew that what he had to do was to, of course, put the bone back, set the fracture, and so on.
Yes.
And at some point, he said he lost control, and that whatever was happening was that whatever was laying there was controlling the movements of his hand.
Holy mackerel. Stop you for a question. Was there any anesthetic?
They guessed, that it would react to with a local anesthesia, so they used it. But even after they used it, they didn't know whether it was producing anesthesia or whether the being had control over what he was feeling. He said that he tried to explain it as best as he could by and automatic movements of the hands that sort of guided his fingers in doing what he was doing. They fixed the wound without internal fixation. That means no plates, no pins, no screws, no wires.
Right.
Because when the bone ends were approximated, he couldn't move it.
You're telling me it healed right away?
The whole thing healed, he said, within 24 hours.
Oh, my goodness. This is hot stuff.
Well, it's an absolutely amazing emotional story, and there was an episode that I'll finish with here, which is even more amazing. There was a telepathic communication between the being and the doctor. And he said it was like downloading large amounts of information into his head, and it felt like somebody was hitting him over the head with a hammer. It was making him sick, like migraine headaches, which lasted for 2 weeks afterwards. And I asked him, "Can you tell us, what it is that you learned from the creature?" And he says, "I'm only going to tell you a very little bit at this meeting." And he said the first thing the creature said was that he felt sorry for human beings. And I said, why? Because the creature said that we could do everything that they could do, but we didn't know how to do it. And number two, and this is very, very prophetic, he said, because we were totally detached from our spiritual self.
Well, that may be so.